Death to Palestine. Believe it or not, that's what they're chanting on the streets of Tehran in protests that started on Saturday and ran all weekend long and even into Monday and maybe Tuesday, if reports I saw this morning are anything to go by. Completely underreported by the mainstream news, but people have been taking to the streets of Tehran and other major cities in Iran to protest Iran's foreign policy. Not the big Satan, great Satan, dandy Satan, whatever they're calling us, but Iran's own government. I don't know where that came from, but I think I like it. I'm going to stick with it.
The dandy Satan.
Okay, gents, yesterday, on Monday, I read Daily Caller's Adam Credo. He called it just the latest in social unrest as Iranians express frustration over the plunging value of their currency and Iran's leadership continued funding of regional terror groups and military operations in Syria on behalf of embattled President Bashar al-Assad. Scott, we've seen the people of Iran take to the streets to protest, maybe an election they didn't approve of or this and that. But this protest really cuts to the heart, to the foundation of Iran's expansionist Islamist foreign policy. Could this be regime threatening?
Well, this is interesting because I think we have assumed in the past that when you see masses of people rising up in support of government policies and anti-United States, anti-Israel, whatever they happen to be anti at the time, and usually it's just the U.S. and Israel, that there is an ideological underpinning for this and a strong foundation in a faith. And when it comes right down to it, as these regimes always inevitably collapse, what you find out is, no, that wasn't the case at all. And I think you're onto something here, Steve, because I think the pocketbook issues are prevailing here, and people are saying, I'm tired of wasting our treasure in Palestine and elsewhere with this Iranian foreign policy. But I think it also shows something else. It's not just the people's pocketbooks that are being pinched. It is the regime's pocketbook because they can no longer afford to pay for the crowds to come to the streets to chant for their cause.
That's a big difference. And nobody's talking about that except for you.
Well, and then the other interesting thing is I saw a related headline, and I admit I didn't read the story, but it said that North Korea this year, for some reason, didn't have their annual anti-United States rally.
It's a mystery.
I think these are unrelated stories, and I don't think we could tie them back to any particular strategy or individual.
I blame Trump.
Well, yeah. Scott, if you'll let me kind of interrupt you with a follow-up, I thought this big buffoon in the White House was supposed to get everybody around the world hating us, and instead we've got this canceled thing in North Korea you were just telling me about, because I missed that story, and now we have anti-Iran protests in Iran.
It's a mystery. It's a mystery to the mainstream media anyway. It's not a mystery to us. And I've been delighted and have been for a long time with the president's approach to foreign policy. I think he was light on foreign policy during the campaign, other than border-related stuff. And one of the critiques of him was, he doesn't obviously have a lot of experience in that area, and so he really didn't talk that much about it, except when it came to China and international trade. But in office, he's been a quick study, and I think his instincts are good when it comes to how to deal with these thugs. I'm not saying, because you're just introducing this idea that these protests happened. I've been monitoring. I read Washington Post. I read New York Times. I see all these websites, and I'm like, what? There were people chanting in the streets of Iran? When did this happen?
All weekend long, buddy.
Yeah, and that's really encouraging. I don't think, and I'll let Bill take this because he mentioned it backstage, but I think we're going to see a little different approach to it from this administration. Let's just say the Trump administration had nothing to do with what's happening in the streets of Tehran right now. In any case, I think its reaction is not going to be an echo of years past.
I hope not. And Scott, I'm glad you mentioned the New York Times, because on the same day that the Daily Caller's Adam Credo reported on this, they did a story saying, well, changes are coming in the Middle East, but it's not what Donald Trump expects. And they quoted a spokesman from Iran's foreign ministry saying, if we ever change our policies, it will have nothing to do with Trump or anyone in the White House or elsewhere. Except Also on Monday, the Wall Street Journal reported that the sanctions are really starting to pinch. The Wall Street Journal report said foreign banks that kept Iran trading oil through previous sanctions are pulling out under pressure from the latest round of U.S. restrictions, hitting a lifeline for the Iranian economy. And it goes on to say that even banks with no direct U.S. exposure are refusing to deal with Tehran, fearing that they will be cut out of the dollar-based global financial system. So, in other words, Barack Obama threw Iran a multi-billion-dollar lifeline. Donald Trump has withdrawn it. Now, Bill, we saw what happened in the previous protests in 2009 when snipers were killing their own people in the streets, and Obama turned a blind eye to it because he wanted to make his Iran deal. Now, I want you to take on the role of Donald Trump. Do you get actively involved in these protests and risk, tainting them as American puppets? Or do you hope that the sanctions continue to pinch, or what do you do?
Well, I don't do nothing the way the light worker did, because looking back on 2009 is all the evidence you ever needed to know that really the only way you can explain Barack Obama's foreign policy is that he's on their side. Absolutely. After that, everything gets very clear. So, do I put troops on the ground in Iran? I do not do that. No. And I don't do anything militarily threatening in this particular case. However, the idea that by having the president support these protesters turns them into America puppets is not relevant to anyone except for progressives at the Kennedy School of Government or whatever else. Because look, Steve, these demonstrations are happening spontaneously, and they've been happening. The young people that overthrew the Shah and overran the U.S. Embassy in 1979, the fundamentalist Islamic radicals, and Iran has been the center of world terrorism and world disruption since they declared war on the United States in 1979. These are not their children in the streets. These are their grandchildren in the streets. And when you live under a regime that tells you you can't have fun, you can't listen to music, you can't hold hands in public, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. When you basically live under the kind of world that progressives are trying to bring to America, which is a world where everything that is not mandatory is forbidden, it doesn't matter whether you're living under an Islamic theocracy or a communist tyranny or any other kind of tyranny. People want to be free. So in answer to your question, if I'm Donald Trump, I would basically do the same thing. He's already done the half of it that's important, right? I've said many times watching North Korea that the thing that Donald Trump understands that nobody before him understood was it's not just stick, it's carrot and stick. Yeah. And most importantly, it's stick first. So he's already given him the stick, right? He's taken away this deal. He's basically said, no, we're not going to pay you money so you can buy more explosives, and we're not going to pay you $800 million the way my predecessor did so you can kill more Americans. We're taking that off the table. We're going to tighten up the sanctions. He's already shown the stick to the Iranian people. They're the ones that feel this.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the mullahs. They don't feel it. The leaders never feel sanctions. My wife is Russian, and I can tell you that the sanctions against Russia have basically destroyed that country. You have no idea how much damage this does to people on streets. Restaurants close, advertising firms go out of business, all the rest. You go right down to bare bones essentials. So these people have grown up with this murderous, disruptive tyranny. They've had enough of it. They are ready to get, once again, out in the streets to defend it. And if the President of the United States, for once, I can't think of an example since Ronald Reagan. I think Donald Trump may be one of these cases. If Trump can understand the way Reagan understood the power that the moral authority of the United States even to this day carries, there's a world of good and evil out there, and we keep forgetting that we are seen as the force of good no matter how many mistakes we make. It is in some way like angels are whose side are the angels on? And to come out and simply say, we're on the side of freedom. We always have been, believe it or not. Well, maybe we had a little interregnum there, but nevertheless, we are on the side of freedom, and we think that these students and the people in the street are right. We'd love to welcome Iran back into the community of nations. They're an ancient civilization, an honorable and glorious civilization. The world needs their participation now. Something like that. And we fully support them in in their efforts to overthrow this horrendous regime that's making them poor and pariahs and killing their citizens and so on. We think they have our full support. That's all I would do as president, and that's all you need to do. And this one will work where the last one didn't, for that reason.
I certainly hope
perhaps,
so.
Steve, can I just
sorry,
throw,
Scott.
I just need
please,
to say this name. Perhaps the blood of Neda Aga Sultan will be avenged in this.
That is my first thought when you said snipers in the streets. That was my instant thought, was that I wonder if this will be the event that actually she died for, among the many others of faceless, nameless people who died. That was the woman who was shot. Was it in the neck, I think, or in the head or something? Died on camera in the street, trying to bring some freedom to her country.
You can
and
still
the president
find
of the United States at the time basically took the side of these snipers and not the people. So there you go.
Yeah. It's just one message to the Iranian people in 2009 of we've got your back, and maybe we wouldn't be in this mess that we're in today. But listen, folks, what's not really often appreciated about post-Shah Iran is they actually have a functioning democracy, and the Iranian people have experience of going to the polls in a peaceful way. Now, it's not what we would call a fair democracy. It's certainly a fraudulent democracy. The mullahs present their list of candidates, and you can choose between the guy who wants to kill all the Christians and Jews slowly and the guy who wants to kill all the Christians and Jews quickly. But they do have experience in these things. So I think the only thing we need to do, I don't want to launch some war against Iran and regime change and all the rest, but regime change is on the table. It really is. Yet again, it was in 2012, it was in 2009, we turned our backs on it. All we have to do today is to send the message to the Iranian people and to the government of Iran, look, all you have to do is hold an actual free and fair election. You have the experience. You know how to do this. You just have to have candidates who aren't off the list that the mullahs have presented to you. That's all it takes. All they need to do is to have the freedom to elect their own candidates. They can make this work. They can do it without bloodshed. Maybe. That's the hope. But they're taking it to the streets, and that's the hope we need, that maybe these bad actors that are responsible for the deaths of so many people over so many years, it's 40 years now, that these guys are on the ash heap of history. So fingers crossed they can do it peacefully. If not, we got to tell them we've got their backs. And that's your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. If you like what you see, click on over, become a member. We would love to have you on board. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.